It's John Boquette from the Newtown Bee, and we're back with our final segment of our pre-budget referendum video visit with a number of town officials, including Board of Finance Chair John Kortz, the Chairman of our Legislative Council, Marianne Jacob, School Superintendent Dr. Joseph Ferrardi, First Selectman Pat Lodra, and Board of Education Chairman Keith Alexander. We're going to start this final segment with Mr. Kortz. John, let's talk a little bit about the way that each of the respective budget proposals ended up versus where they started in terms of the dollars and cents.
I think on the selectmen's side, and to follow up on a comment that Marianne had made, I think both sides of the budget, and I'll even include the Board of Ed, we're getting to be leaner and leaner. And I think that from a taxpayer's point of view, that's a good thing, but it also presents a certain type of challenge on both sides. You can only do so much. I think those savings over the last couple of years that we've realized continued, but in a more simple form this year. Our recommendations to the council on the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education side were really in the form of items like heating fuel or like busing or something like that, that really didn't have any impact on how the town operates or how the Board of Education operates. That's a good spot to be in if you can work as a town to find savings for taxpayers and not really affect the services that were delivered. So from beginning to end, without listing a whole host of different items, and there were a number of them, I think we were pretty successful in identifying those and having both the town and the Board of Ed side embrace them so that we can present a responsible budget to the town.
Marianne, how about you, looking way back to the beginning of the budget process and where it ended up with the council? What are your thoughts about its progression?
I think, the council has proven to be pretty conservative in general. I can't speak for everyone, but my observation is that, and based on conversations we had early on, that their expectation was a zero tax increase. And I think some people even would have liked to see a reduction in spending or zero spending increase. The Board of Finance this year did really all of the heavy lifting before we got the budget in terms of any reductions that were made. Bringing us very close to a zero spending increase, but certainly being able to reduce taxes for the taxpayers. And I think while there's still some council members who had some concerns about some spending areas, overall it met with unanimous approval in the end. And I think we're at a place that the voters can support.
Very good. Dr. Ferrardi, I understand there was some distance between the amount of money proposed when you first received this year's budget request versus where it ended up when you handed off to the Board of Finance.
John, I'm a huge proponent of asking for what is needed. And what I mean by that, there are critics that will always look back and say, if you asked for this, you knew there was linear reduction, you ended this place, it's better than. And I don't believe in that at all. I believe that what should come out of my office is the actual need. So prior to this being a public launch to the Board of Education, there was approximately a $2.3 million reduction that took place out of my office, which presented to the school board a 1.27% increase. Through the process of deliberating and going through the many different sectors of the budget, when the budget crossed the finish line at the Legislative Council, what did take place in regards to change, in many cases took place because of time. As John Kortz indicated, the cost of energy change. In addition to that, the work at the Finance Board level on issues outside of the core of teaching and learning ended up netting a significant savings to the school board moving forward. So from our initial launch to where we landed, I can share with our electorate, with the voters on the 28th, that what was presented by the leadership team remains in place going forward to the voters on that fourth Tuesday in April, and it does so in a way which I believe is the appropriate package to enhance teaching and learning and student outcomes for this district.
Thank you. Mrs. Lodra, you were sort of in the same boat. Things were kind of fluid in some respects during the Board of Selectmen's budget refining process.
A little fluid, yes, but I've been the first selectman during the greatest financial challenge that this community has faced, perhaps the whole country since the Depression. I have learned in those 6 budgets that I've prepared to be very direct, very honest with department heads as they are crafting their budget, so that I don't put them in a position to anticipate that there's going to be some resources available for them that are not going to be there. So our marching orders essentially from the Board of Selectmen to department heads right at the outset was no new staff, no new programs, hold on capital, understand the overarching goal is a 0% increase. What I haven't been able to do and hope to be able to do in future budgets is go back to those department heads and say, look at what we've had to reduce over the past 6 years, and now start telling me what can we do to repair and restore some of the services that we've had to eliminate over those periods of time. So I anticipate that might be future conversation. The nature of the Board of Selectmen this year was to hold the line and say, you know, we really we're still confronting some serious economic challenges, and we need to stay at that 0% for everyone as much as we can.
And for you, Mr. Alexander, the Board of Education was sort of the opposite side of the scale to Dr. Arardi. What were a couple of your observations in regards to where the proposal started off versus where it ended when it was handed off to the Board of Finance?
Well, I have to say from the outset, the CEOs of the town and the district that sit next to me did a lot of the work in finding what was needed. That what was needed was a good focus for all of us. I was very pleased, as was I think the entire board, to notice once again, a few years down the line, that self-funding of medical has made a difference to us. We were able to get another reduction out of that during this process, which I thank the Board of Finance for finding. That has really been a good system for us overall. The Board of Education used to spend quite a bit more on our benefits package. We're getting good benefits and at a much reduced cost, so that's a good thing.
Very good. Our final question to our panel tonight, which will start with Mr. Alexander, is talking a little bit about the dynamic of increased spending versus tax reductions. From the Board of Education's perspective, Keith, what would you like taxpayers to know about that interesting dynamic?
Well, I think at our end, and Dr. Arardi will go into this a little more, I expect, but what at our end we see is trying to make sure that we reduce the things we can reduce based on the declining enrollment, and without giving up new initiatives. We always need new initiatives because you need to be changing and moving. As a school system, we need to continue to grow and find the best things for students. We want our students to have the best education we can provide. So if we can inspire them and still manage to keep the funding at a reasonable level, that's a great start.
Mrs. Lodger, not just a historic year because of the reduction in both taxation and the mill rate, but it comes with an increase in spending.
What we really look at really is a growth in our grand list. That's really the focal point that should drive budget decisions and discussions this point forward. If we're going to moderate our taxation, we're going to have to look at growth in the grand list as the tool, as the vehicle that we can use to increase spending in any way. So you know, as John Ports mentioned earlier, some of the financial policies that have been put in place have positioned us well to go forward with grand list growth. That really has to be our focus. So it's really, when we talk about budgets, it's really only one side of the equation. You have to talk about your revenue stream. We should anticipate declining revenue again from the state of Connecticut this year, next year, and the year after at least. So we're essentially going to be on our own. We need to build the wealth of our community in ways that are reasonable and appropriate and give us the resources we need to provide for essential services in public health, public safety, park and rec, education, the public works, the things that communities have to do to ensure a high quality of life for all of its residents.
How about for you, Dr. Arardi?
There's two factors that I just want to share briefly. One is that in some cases we don't control what we spend, and those are your mandates that we talk about quite often that come from the federal or the state legislature. The second piece is that there are still some very unique aspects to our budget that pertain to the tragedy of 2.5 years ago. With that as a piece to the puzzle to the operational plan for 2015, for the school superintendent to sit with a 0.34% budget and in good faith tell this community that it's a budget that supports and enhances teaching and learning in partnership with a reduction in taxes. I think of a perfect storm usually in a negative way. I don't think it could have played out in a better way.
How about in your perspective, Marianne?
Well, you know, when I listen to the people at this table talk, I'm reminded of the fact that there's 28 people that are represented among the boards and commissions that we chair. And I often hear people talk about, you know, letting the voters decide very early on in the process. But one of the reasons we have the checks and balances in place, and the way our government is structured, is to allow the time and different areas of expertise to go through a budget and work their magic, so to speak. I think it showed again this year the benefit of that process. And I think that voters, you know, should be happy that the people who represent them have taken the time and made the work possible to do that. I think there's so many other things that go into the budget that aren't part of the budget cycle, like supporting efforts to increase our commercial growth on an ongoing basis during the year, supporting different areas of our community so that there's a growth in our grand list. You know, some of the other things that Pat had talked about, you know, even things like contract negotiations, which happen in off budget cycle times, help contribute to a reasonable budget. And all of those things are being done on an ongoing basis by the 28 people that you've elected to serve you, and I think you should be very proud of that work.
And Mr. Courts, really perhaps something for every demographic in town in this budget, along with a reduction in taxation and the mill rate.
I think we're all lucky to serve the people of Newtown, because Newtown really is a wonderful place. Specifically answering your question, we've been able to lower taxes overall because of two major factors. One, savings that we've realized, the growth in the grand list, as Pat mentioned, the additional revenue that we're seeing. Spending is going up slightly, but our efforts are really paying off more than what our actual increase is. So that's the reason why we can see an actual reduction in roughly 0.3 of a mil this current year. The budget provides for an awful lot of things for an awful lot of different segments. Newtown has dealt with a lot and faces a lot of challenges going forward, whether it's the state we live in, to the things that every municipality faces. Changing demographics is going to be very, very much on everybody's radar. And to that end, I think the elected officials in town have realized that, not only in some of the things that you see in this budget in regard to the school and the town, but also in regards to our seniors. This budget actually includes $1.6 million in senior tax relief. We're very focused and trying to be even more focused on every segment in town because they all play a vital role in our diversity. I would be remiss, though, if I didn't say thank you to everybody for all of the help that they provided the Board of Education, from the Board of Education to the Board of Selectmen, and also to a bunch of Board of Finance members who I've had the pleasure to serve with. We have a really good board, and I'm very, very much appreciative of all their efforts as well.
Well, I want to thank all of you officials for coming out and talking to the taxpayers today through our newtownbee.com video channel. My name is John Boquette with the Newtown Bee, and we're pleased to be joined this evening by John Courts, Chairman of the Board of Finance, Legislative Council Chair Marianne Jacob, School Superintendent Dr. Joseph Ferrardi, First Selectman Pat Lodra, and Board of Education Chairman Keith Alexander. Don't forget, the polls will be open on Tuesday, April 28th from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. There will also be a couple of absentee voting sessions available prior to that. We urge you to please go out and exercise your right to vote for the 2015-16 proposed Newtown budget.